Story of my life.
All right, let's get it down. You ready? 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 Oh, good, good, good. It's on DVD now. All righty. We had brief time, 20 minutes or so, to leap into the world of specific strategy elicitation. Prior to lunch, my question is, how many of you are just totally confused and have a bunch of VAKs on your paper? Wow. Thanks, Ken. A learning tool, a teaching tool. Wait, stop.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to have a discussion about hopefully, most groups got through one round or close to one round, more or less complete. I want to give you some fuller background material on strategy elicitation, particularly around decisions, and some models to kind of put this in. I wanted to give us a minimum structure and just a couple of demonstrations up front to jump into it, right? To really get a sense of, hey, this isn't so difficult. You're just kind of tracking what's going on. In the practitioner training, the primary reason that we've included this particular exercise on strategies is to really tune you into the fact that what's happening is always a series of linked structures or patterns. You could call them strategies, you could call them parts of someone's map of the world, right? So that your sensory acuity is really alert to that. That things don't just happen, it's one big visual construct, and that's it. When someone's having an experience, they may see something, compare it to something else, talk to themselves a bit, compare something else, and then have a feeling. And that's the chunk of experience that you're after, right? So this is to tune your brain to that. We also wanted to present it because it does form the basis of some types of modeling structures that you get into in the master practitioner training. Some kind of smaller chunk modeling things. I think the most relevant reference book for this is the Neurolinguistic Programming Volume 1. The whole thing about strategy elicitation with little VAKs is written up pretty exhaustively there, as it links particularly into modeling. But if we look at this in another way, the whole idea in modeling NLP, or modeling NLP, kind of clusters around a model that a guy named Carl Pribram and Galanter and Miller, some computer cyberneticists, came up with. It was called the TOTE pattern. And the TOTE stands, it's an acronym for these letters here: test, operate, test, exit. And this is sort of computer jargon. Looks a little difficult, but what it really means, we've already had an experience of it, and you've been doing this already. That first you have a goal. And in the Pribram model, this is referred to as the first test. Same thing in our little chart over here. Wherever it went. How do you know to begin deciding? Right? That first test is the goal of a strategy. Right? What we're going to look at here is a spelling strategy. How to spell the word enough. So the trigger, the goal, may be that you get an auditory digital, somebody says to you, right? Hey, spell enough. Right? That's the trigger or the goal then of the whole strategy, the spelling strategy that you go through. So after you've established the goal, what it is you want to do, whether it's spell a word or order from a menu, you do something. You do some kind of operation, right? You look at the menu, you make pictures, you taste it. You're going through some kind of an operation. In the case of spelling enough, what you may do, a good way to do it in fact, is to look up visual remembered and get a visual image of the word spelled, right? E-N-O-U-G-H. So you got that, and if you see that word, then this little M over the arrow here, this means meta, or it's a feeling about what just came before. It's a little strategy notation. When you first make your first attempt at spelling enough by, comparing the way you're spelling it to this visual remembered image, let's say that the way that you spell it is E-N-U-F. Right? In other words, it's incorrect. What happens is you'll get a little comparison here, a kinesthetic comparison that it doesn't look familiar. compare that inside. Spelling enough, E-N-O-U-G-H, and comparing that to the image of it written, versus E-N-U-F. Right? Judy's definitely got this one. It's a real kinesthetic, isn't it? It's not familiar. It doesn't quite fit. If it doesn't work at this point, if it's not familiar, you cycle back. And you may say to yourself inside, okay, spell enough. And then you see the image of the word. You have a feeling about it. And when it matches, when it's E-N-O-U-G-H, there's this direct match, right? And you get a kinesthetic feeling of certainty. And this is the exit. This is when you know you've spelled it correctly. So that's basically what a tote pattern is. You have a goal, certain operations that you undertake, and then evidence to compare it to. And in a spelling strategy, it's this feeling of familiarity. It's the difference between the feeling of E-N-U-F and E-N-O-U-G-H. In our elicitation with Monet about the restaurant, remember the test, right, was this gustatory kinesthetic feeling. And when it reached a certain crescendo and she tested, is this good enough? Or does this feel, sort of taste feel sufficiently intense, right? Then she'd exit. If it didn't, she'd cycle back through and look at something else in the menu. So this is another way to think about precisely what you're doing in a sort of a little precise pattern. You got a goal, you do an operation, you check it against some kind of evidence. And not always, but quite often this evidence before you exit is a feeling. A good feeling, or in the case of, Cheryl waking up, it was when the energy was really there, right? She cycled back through this reading her list until she saw 20 items, the energy was there, and then boom, she's up. Right? The way that this tote links to what you're doing with the decision strategies are, the first test is how do you know to begin deciding? Well, I'm looking at the menu, or someone says, what would you like for dinner, right? Then the operation is how you generate alternatives. Look at the menu, make a picture, taste it. And the second test, which is the evidence, that's how do you evaluate the alternatives? That is, does it taste, feel good enough yet? If it doesn't, you cycle back through, you do another operation. In a decision strategy, for example, this little loop can take a while because you're deciding on multiple examples. If it's a complex problem, you may go between this and this 6, 7, 8, 9 times. But when it meets the criteria, right, of achieving the goal, boom. And this, in this particular case, this one that we demonstrated in this one is a kinesthetic feeling. So let me ask you at this point, what questions do you have about the elicitations that you're doing? Maya?
I was evaluating Ivan's way of choosing food, and at one point I have a sequence, and at one point he said that if for example he has already five sorted dishes or chicken with side dishes, and now he remembers what he had yesterday.
Right.
So he needs to sort out between these two visual pictures.
Right.
From my point of view is that this is not entirely visual process, it should be something in between, and he was denying that it's kinesthetic. I think it was auditory digital. Thinking about it, is it possible?
It's possible. Sure.
Can it be just visual without anything in between?
It's absolutely possible.
So how
generally, it's an interesting thing. Some people take a architect, right, looking at blueprints all his life, and he has real precise internal visual imagery. If he sees a mismatch or some error in a blueprint that somebody submits, the thing may be so wired in, so immediate, it's literally a visual, that's it, a visual comparison. It's possible, and maybe even likely, that at some really deep level there's a faint kinesthetic of this one feels wrong or whatever. But primarily, unless you think you deal with what is in the person's awareness, right, and a little bit deeper, to make sure, like as you do, that there's nothing, there doesn't seem to be anything else there. And then, if it works, or if you could try on a similar strategy and it makes sense to you, right, and it has congruent agreement over there that that's the way it is, then I would go with it.
But auditory digital is talking within myself, right?
Right. Either your own voice or someone else's.
Okay.
Right.
So it can be kinesthetic or it can be auditory digital in between the expressions. Or it can be nothing if it's a skill of just looking at the pattern and say, okay, this is wrong.
Yeah.
So
That's a possibility.
But I think between sorting different foods.
Well, you were saying that he was making a comparison between these 5 chicken dishes that he had.
And one that he had, and some that he had last 3 days.
Right.
So he wanted to get something new.
All right. Now that's an interesting one, see, because what I heard creep in here was a criteria, right? A criteria called novelty or something new. So he had like a little parentheses strategy. He had the 5 chicken dishes, and then he goes, wait a minute, maybe I'd like something new, which became the criteria, right? Then he looked at what I have yesterday, and he does a comparison between these two, right? And he eliminates maybe 2 of these, right, that he had yesterday, and then he selects from these.
So what is the criteria?
The criteria is novelty, or not wanting the same thing.
It's a kinesthetic?
Is it?
I just see stuff.
I just see stuff.
Well, I can understand that because I can imagine this pattern of 5 dishes and these 5 other dishes, and they get together,
Right.
and one of them just stands out.
Right.
Like this.
Yeah, or it could be that, I don't know how he's got wired up. When he's doing a comparison, if there's 3 that are the same, they literally cancel each other, and he's
Right,
with
cancel
2.
each other and one stands out.
Right.
So this is entirely possible.
That's entirely possible.
Okay.
Other people might do it where they compare it, and they get a real strong kinesthetic and get a voice that says, no, I don't want that, I had it yesterday. It's quite possible in Ivan's case that it's just a visual kind of overlap, and these disappear if they're the same.
So when you do modeling somebody, how do you exactly find out what the person exactly does or he thinks that he does do that?
Let's go through it methodically. As a matter of fact, on this one, I'd like you to track on your handouts too. If I overload you with content right after lunch, I hope you all had a big lunch, because now we're going to feed the mind. On page number 10. Yep.
What's the K/K?
K/K up here. Actually, on this one, you could write that differently. Instead of K/K, it could look like this. Get rid of that one. This could be plus or minus for familiar. Right? It's probably easier to think about it that way.
So it's K plus or minus familiar, and then K plus or minus match mismatch.
Or certainty. Right? It's kind of a reference experience that you have for knowing when a word is spelled. Because you feel the same sense of certainty whether the word is cat or house or dog or tree. Right? And that certainty comes up and you got it, that's the exit. But the familiarity is when you're comparing, instead of spelling hat, you're sorting for H-O-T, is that familiar? Right? It's not. So you go back and redo it, H-A-T, that's familiar, and then it gives you that solid feeling. Right? So there's kind of 2 little feelings generally in spelling linked together.
So that's the test. That's the evidence.
Yes, that's the evidence part. Is it familiar or not familiar? Alrighty? So if we look on page 10, this is a rundown of what you're up to right now. You're 1 round through this. You're identifying a specific decision. We've decided to work on menu selection in the restaurant. So some fine point guidelines. I've mentioned this briefly. Have the person be back in the situation, so they're not dissociated about it or whatever. They're actually in it, right? And don't just remember, go back there and recapitulate the process. And when you speak, you want to make sure that you're speaking in the present tense, because you want to locate them as if they're in that moment. So if you say things like, how did you see yourself then? That's confusing, right? It's much more congruent to say, okay, you're looking at the menu. The waitress has just said, do you want salad? What do you do now? So you keep it in the present tense, locating them in their experience. Now, on these, you'll notice there's a series of steps. It kind of goes like this. I mean, ideally it goes straight through, but sometimes it cycles back. And you're gathering information about each one of these steps. So to get the next step, like the step after an operation or something, you ask the question, you backtrack. You backtrack what you've done so far. And you heard me do this a number of times when I was eliciting strategies. You say something like, okay, so you see a remembered image, and then you talk to yourself, so you backtrack, and you're looking for congruence in them. Agreement. They're going, yeah, that's what I do, that's what I do. And then you simply ask the words, and then, what happens next? So you backtrack to get congruence, then you ask the words, the question, and then, what do you do? All right? To get the previous step, if you're not sure where you're at here and you think there's something that came before it, right? Then the question is simply, how do you know to do whatever it is? How do you know to taste it? Oh, well, I saw a picture of it, right? So if you feel like you need a previous step, you ask the question, how do you know to do something? If you want the next one, you backtrack and ask the question, and then what do you do? So that's just a way to navigate back and forth to get complete information. And these little questions, we've already covered these. And this is kind of what answers the question that Maya was asking here, to test your elicitation, to make sure you've got it, right? The easiest way is to run the person through the sequence again from the beginning. Just recapitulate and backtrack the whole thing very congruently. And what you're doing is you're calibrating to and looking for nonverbal confirmation. Right? If you see confusion or lack of congruence, then you want to see if there's something that they're, experiencing that you haven't yet identified. And you can also, just to check it out, try some different contexts. In other words, if it's a menu ordering strategy at a restaurant, it should work not only for the time that you're eliciting now, but a time they went to a restaurant a week later or a week earlier, or, to order breakfast at a restaurant versus dinner. A restaurant ordering strategy, decision strategy, is going to be pretty concrete. In other words, you're not going to change your strategy every time you go to a restaurant. You've got a strategy because, for better or worse, it works for you, and you know how to use it.
Sorry, but to go buy a shirt, for example, and
Yeah.
to go buy a car, we found that there's major, obviously for eating, that's going to be different than buying a car or something.
Right.
But to buy other products or to buy other...
They can be very similar. It's going to depend on how the person is wired up. When you change, if you elicit a number of decision strategies in a person, like how do they order food, how do they buy a car, how do they buy a shirt, you're going to find some major similarities, right? But you'll also find differences. And often the differences aren't so much in the specific strategy. They're going to be in the criteria, right? So let's say someone has got enough wealth they don't care about how much a restaurant car costs. But if they're going to go out and buy a private jet, suddenly that might be an issue. Or color in a wardrobe could be a criteria that's much more important than at the restaurant. So the criteria are likely to change, but the decision, the actual strategy is likely to be quite similar, with some possible exceptions according to context, like most people don't taste the shirt before they buy it. But they will imagine, not anything possible, beyond every behavior, there's a Okay, on the next page here are some even finer tuning points. These are guidelines for elicitation, and as I was going around the groups, I saw a lot of you doing these anyway, without having read this. The first is to, be aware of all the accessing cues that are there, not just the see, hear, and feel words that a person is using, right? You can also track on those, but you can track on things like their hand gestures, right? We were experimenting with that yesterday. Their eye accessing cues. That's a real giveaway for specific rep system sequencing. And other little things we haven't talked about too much, but one way to begin to at least get an idea about representational system is breathing and speaking. The way that I've been speaking right now, since we got back from lunch, is quite rapid, if you notice. It's not just to keep you awake. Just keep me awake. No. It's to, and you'll notice that my breathing, as I've been speaking like this, tends to be up here. Earlier, when we were talking about that special place, you remember the special place? The big snowflakes coming down. Thank you again for that image. Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a lot of feedback from that.
Yeah, right. It's like, where was that again? So at any rate, my voice tone did what? It dropped down. Breathing came down here. And these are distinctions between visual types of voice tone and tempo, and breathing, which tends to be up here, and auditory, which tends to be slower and lower and down here. Right? So those are just other things you can kind of calibrate to give an inroad into where someone is in their strategy. Right? You can make sure you get a logical sequence. It may seem strange to you, but there should be a certain kind of logic to it. In other words, it should be possible to move from one point in the strategy to another by doing what they're doing. It's kind of like Maya, you were saying with the comparison. It may not be the way that you would do it, because it might be nice to have a feeling about these two, but it could make sense that if one picture cancels out another, that's a logical sequence.
It's possible to model.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's it. You should be, and it should say here somewhere, you should be able to recapitulate or redo the pattern internally and get a kind of a logical sequence, and it should make sense to you. If it doesn't, you might want to go back and gather information. Right? And this number 3 here, I already mentioned, notice loops, recurrent sequences of steps, right? And those can be useful, actually, because they can help avoid an endless string of VAKs. Some of you, if you look at your elicitation papers, the chain is really quite long, but if you look at it from a little bit greater distance, you can see there's actually a recurrent step or two, and you can condense that in terms of the way you notate it. And this is another way to kind of confirm you've got the right sequence. If you're not sure about it, try it out a couple of different ways, right? And find out which way the person responds to most congruently. So if you're not sure it's a picture he's seeing or one he's making up, backtrack it and use both and see which one he goes, oh, yeah, that feels more familiar, or that's the way I do it. Right?
If you get discrepancies between what the person's telling you and their nonverbal behavior,
right.
do you question, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I tend to trust the nonverbal response first and then explore it a bit more deeply, because as we were noticing even in the demonstration, these things are really under the radar of consciousness quite often. But if you're getting good calibrations to nonverbal, unconscious congruence, then what I would do is make the pattern more and more obvious to the conscious mind and see if you don't get oh, hey, you're right, I do have a little picture in there.
Like, bring that, I see you looking at you, are you
Right.
seeing something?
Right, right. And again, I would be sort of rep system specific as a last resort. Again, you want to be real artfully vague in saying or asking things like, what color is the picture you're seeing, or do you see anything? Right? Again, give them a lot of options so that they are sorting for their own experience. Right? And this goes along with that. Listing possible representational system options can help the person know what kind of information you want. If you're talking about time to get up, you could say things like, well, do you see something, hear something, or feel something? You offer all three. This is just a little fine point that it's a sort of a window into when someone is using auditory digital or accessing auditory digital. A lot of you notice this, that it'll sound as if they're literally speaking in quotes, right? They'll say something like, well, I look at the menu and I imagine chalupas. And then I say to myself, wow, that would be good. And that, wow, that would be good, the voice tone shifts somehow. It's almost like it's in quotes. So this is just kind of another indicator that auditory digital or words are being used, when their voice sort of shifts to sound like they're literally reading a teleprompter or speaking in quotes. And we've talked about number 7 here quite a bit. Be sure you're eliciting a strategy, not installing your own. Give them options, rep systems, etc. And let's see. I don't know if we want to get into this. I think we'll discuss this thing of designing strategies later until after elicitation. So with that as preamble, we're about ready to get back into our small groups, and you should have a couple of rounds left. Any questions at this point about how to proceed? Okay, let's get, whoops. Yeah, same groups, and you should have, we're estimating 2 rounds left, and we were giving you, 20 minutes each, so we'll go around the groups and give you a signal of when to change to the third person, and we'll be back here in about 40 minutes or so. Okay, let's see, you got about half of you back, that's good. Not bad odds for Thursday afternoon. Well, while these other folks are roaming in, How'd it go? I was impressed with you.
It was good when we were trying to keep it in the present.
Yeah.
A lot of times there were dialogues going back to the past. Think about the last meal, so you go visual.
Right.
And then you focus
Right.
on the present, and you go kinesthetic.
Right.
And then you think about the next thing, you go back to this past.
Right.
Think, okay, what do you do next? Then you go to the present.
Right. Well, you know, it's the way to kind of think about this is that it's like your experience is this beautiful piece of wood floating on a river, right? And that's kind of, you know, the wood is experiencing the flow and seeing the trees and feeling the river, but the river itself is an unbroken stream of VAKs, internal and external, right? And in some ways it's almost arbitrary where you slice experience to extract the pattern. You can do it contextually and behaviorally, like when you're in the restaurant ordering food, right? And that kind of narrows everything down to just that one little, and it's minuscule. You know, for some people, you know, you just spent 25, 30 minutes eliciting a strategy that takes them maybe 2 minutes, right? And it took all that time to elicit the strategy, right? Amazing. So,
Subway.
yeah, right. A lousy Subway. And all they had were the ham with the cheese, you know. So, again, the primary reason that we had you explore this whole notion of these patterns of strategies is to really wire in the awareness that these sequences, these patterns of behavior are consistently there. They're there in big contexts like decisions or motivations and smaller subsets like a sports activity. I mean, the strategy for football is somewhat similar to basketball, but there are distinctions and like that. And yet the thing to keep in mind is that every behavior, every emotional state has behind it a real rich strategic flow to produce that result. Whether it's walking to the back of the room to get a cup of coffee, right? Or, you know, deciding which pen you're going to write your notes in that day. So this is primarily a process of pattern detection and, again, kind of a preamble into strategies as a means of modeling. Because I just want you to be aware that many of the techniques that you'll be learning and you already have learned, the new behavior generator, even simple anchoring, right? The phobia trauma procedure, you know, other specific techniques are models of performance. So they're strategies. Right? Another way to think about NLP, you know, is that they are specific strategies of excellent performance. And this is a kind of a window in how do you begin to elicit these strategies. But you should also be aware that this is only one component of generating these models. You kind of get the cognitive flow, what they're doing inside, but what we just didn't really include a whole lot about emotional states, right? What the person's really feeling in the process, right? Or belief systems, or how they orient or structure their criteria. And all of those can have a direct impact on how the strategy fires off, when it fires off, and like that.
Just something that I think related to that. One of the responses that came up prior to in the decision process, prior to making the decision, there was a check, and it had to do with we had quite a discussion about whether it was kinesthetic or audio or both or what preceded the other.
Right.
Basically, it was we would call it like a conscience type of a thing. It was because it was, do you want to be a good girl or a bad girl today? And,
Oh, taking your parts to lunch, are you? Is it the good Judy or the bad Judy that's ordering today?
It's right in the context of what you said this morning. You got up and said, you know,
I'm going to stick with good, you know, lettuce, you know, then there's lunch. I go, oh, that brie sandwich is warm. Oh, it's warm brie sandwich and a croissant with ham. Oh, that sounds great. And then just, you know, make the decision. Am I going to really stick with the initial thing this morning? Or will I allow myself, you know, the pleasure?
Well, what happened, though, when you described it to us was you felt your wasting.
Yes, that's true. And I thought, how tight?
Another criteria hurt right?
How tight are my pants? How comfortable am I in my clothes? I don't want to be uncomfortable, so
Exactly.
I'll
So
stick with it today and tomorrow.
great learning, because someone comes to you and they could say something like, well, I'm having a lot of trouble making decisions. Things like eating in a restaurant. I'll go in and I'll look at it and I want the salad and I'll want the organic bread, but on the other hand, they've got this wonderful, and you realize that it's not a decision-making process that's the difficulty. It's a parts conflict. There's the good Judy, the bad Judy, or whatever, right? And in fact, I'll bet you, really, if you dealt with these two parts as if they were separate parts, and you could label them good Judy, bad Judy, that's fine. And if you will listen to their decision-making strategy, how she decides the brie or whatever, there's going to be maybe a few minor differences, but I bet it's going to be almost the same strategy, right? But the criteria is different.
This was sort of a blindside.
Mm-hmm.
The criteria is what it seemed like.
Right.
Because it came up like
Right.
just the last second
Yeah.
type of a thing. All, the other criteria had been established ahead of time for all the, that could be
Never-
identified. And
absolutely.
this one came out of left field, and
You never know when a part is going to pop up. Think about that seriously in terms of strategies. Let's say, and you've all experienced this when you've told yourself, I'm going to stick to this, whether it's a diet or an exercise program or whatever. You got a great strategy, you know what to order, you've done the research, and let's say you've been doing it for 2 or 3 weeks, right? But there's another aspect of you that wants to cut loose, be wild, do whatever the heck they want to do, and it's been in the background, right? And it's almost like it's building up to a certain kind of, plateau, crescendo. And when it reaches that threshold, you could be just cruising along thinking everything's fine, and suddenly it's like, no, I want the big sundae, and the chocolate and the da-da-da-da. It's like the consistency of a pattern can actually call forth another part. So that in itself is a strategy. How do parts pop up in you? Right? Some of them pop up almost, it's not like repression, it's simply because their positive intention hasn't been acknowledged for a period of time. And for example, in the eating case, the positive intention could be something like fun or comfort, that that aspect of the person doesn't feel as if they're getting that in the healthy diet. They may be getting health and vitality, but it's no fun, right? And so suddenly this aspect whose positive intention is fun pops in and says, out the window with the diet. So there are other patterns in NLP to address this whole thing and deal with parts and their alignment so that the strategy can be something that both of them appreciate and both of them kind of acknowledge and agree to. Good observation. Yeah, Alma.
Question. Would the strategy will be different from one restaurant to another restaurant or one particular situation?
Well, again, the criteria might, but the strategy is likely to be the very same.
So why we have to choose like one certain event or situation and just concentrate on this present time? And we'll just ask in general, so we can find the strategy in general in choosing the food.
Yeah.
And in the exercise, what's
Yeah.
focus in just one time.
Exactly. And that again, these strategies tend to be pretty durable and hardwired. Otherwise nothing would ever get done. You'd have to make up a new strategy every time you went to a restaurant or decided what you wanted for breakfast. These things are relatively hardwired. In other words, you've repeated them so many times, they're just a real unconscious pattern. And they're durable. The things that do tend to change more than the strategy are the criteria that come up front. And these are in response to sort of environmental needs. If it's the first of the month and you just got a bonus and you got lots of money, hey, then maybe expense isn't that big a deal. But if it's the end of the month and you're on a tight budget, then suddenly your restaurants change. But the way you decide what to order from the menu is going to be the same one way or the other. Yes?
According to you, do you think a criteria will have a structure?
The criteria have a structure. Yes, they do.
Because you might have different criteria for different locations, different time, different...
As a matter of fact, again, just a brief preview, about 3 days ago I taught a pattern in the master practitioner training that had to do with adjusting the relevance of criteria using NLP and submodalities. Yeah.
So if you go from the criteria, then it will not be linear. It will go other directions. So
Right.
for example, the criteria of how hungry I am or how much money I have, and then it goes here, and then, okay, what kind of restaurant it is, and it goes like this, and if it's a familiar restaurant of this type, then or not unfamiliar, so it can go like multiple branches.
Right. Let's use a metaphor. Let's say you're a carpenter. Right? You're a great carpenter. You know how to frame a house and put up wallboard and make cabinets. That's kind of like the bedrock strategy skill set that you have. Right? But then there's a whole different layer to the whole notion of construction. That's finding a client, and purchasing the land. There's all this background stuff that may be involved, kind of like criteria that then determine when you fire off your skills, when your skills come into play, or when a strategy comes into play. And criteria often respond a lot. In some ways, they're more malleable. They respond to what's going on in the environment and in your life, and they're flexible. As we were saying, the criteria you use to buy a car may be very different than the ones you use to buy clothes or whatever. But the actual decision, once the criteria are met, and you've entered into a decision strategy, the decision strategy for buying a car or buying clothes or deciding what to get at a restaurant is going to be very, very similar. It's just one of the ways the brain works to accelerate, to streamline things. Right? Yeah, okay.
And maybe this is not appropriate to this discussion, but where do the beliefs come in?
Where do the beliefs come in?
I guess establish those criteria.
Right. All right, let me depart briefly. This is, those of you who were at the evening presentation last night kind of got a quick course of this, and some of you may have read it in various other areas in the field of NLP. How many people in here are not familiar with Robert Dilts's logical levels? Okay, good. So let's look at those. This is kind of you remember our little NLP pie with the 3 pieces, right? Behavior, states, and thinking. Robert Dilts developed sort of a further evolution of this model, and we use it in NLP. It's called logical levels, right? And the lowest logical level is the environment, right? This is kind of the anatomy of subjective experience, if you will. And what do we do in the environment? This is an environment right here. What are we doing in this environment?
We're rolling.
Yeah, right. We're doing stuff, right? I mean, in the very base sense, we're behaving. The behavior may be holding a notebook on our lap, or looking up in the front of the room, or holding a pen, or putting your knee in a chair. You do things in the environment. You do actions, activities, behaviors. So from our little NLP pie, this external behavior, the behavior part, is right here. Right? We do behaviors in the environment. But what permits us to do behaviors? Right? Capabilities. Exactly right. Let's think about it in terms of athletics. So you have the capability, you've developed an athletic capability. You work out a bit, you play a couple of sports. So you have this capability base, and what the capabilities say of playing basketball or dancing, what it allows you to do is all kinds of different behaviors, right? Capability is like a strategy. A capability is at the level of internal computation. This is kind of strategies and thinking, right? In sports, the capability to determine how exactly you move the basketball with your body, how to play the ball, how to pass the ball, all of this is in your mental map of reality. And since it's there, it permits your body to do all kinds of different things in the environment. Right? So let's say the strategy, a good decision strategy, is actually a capability you have. It's simply one that's unconscious. It's not one you have to pop out and review every time you make a decision. It's just there automatically. It's like an unconscious capability. So what that unconscious capability of decision-making does, it lets you do all kinds of behaviors in the environment. You can go to any restaurant in the world, right? And you may have to gather more information if you don't understand the language. But once you have the capability of making decisions, right, then, boy, all kinds of different behaviors are open to you. But what is it that really enables you to develop a capability? Resources, and specifically beliefs, right? So beliefs, let's say that you're the kind of kid that grew up and maybe your mom and dad weren't very athletic, but they really loved music, and they gave you the violin and the piano lessons, and you kind of got into that, and they kept saying, well, you know, she's not very athletic, but boy, she plays beautiful music, and, you know, and then you want to maybe try it out, so you go play a game with your friends, and you don't do very well, and it seems to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So after a while, you form the belief, oh, well, I'm just not athletic, I'm artistic. If you have a belief that you're not athletic, what kind of capabilities are you unlikely to develop? Athletic capabilities. And if those capabilities aren't generated, guess what happens to behaviors? You never develop the behaviors, right? So a belief is a very powerful thing because it either permits or prohibits the development of capabilities. If you have the belief that, well, not only am I musical, but I'm a heck of an athlete, right? Then you develop a whole different set of capabilities, and it enhances the behaviors that you're able to do in the world, right? So, Ricardo, that's kind of the level at which beliefs integrate into this whole structure. And in the logical levels, there's a couple of other levels above that, that beliefs are expressions of something, right? And generally, when we state a belief or explore a belief, we prefix it with the first person singular pronoun, I. I believe. That I statement comes up. So these beliefs somehow rise out of something that we experience to be an I. Us. So there's a level of identity above beliefs. Identity, in a sense, is the sort of the
Being?
Yeah, the container, if you will, right? That contains beliefs. It contains capabilities, behaviors. And, it determines the environments that you actually find yourself in. It's that felt core sense of self. And even that, identity, it's obvious that these others, beliefs, capabilities, behaviors, right, those all change. I mean, you're not doing the same, with some notable exceptions, the same behaviors you were when you were 5 or 6, are you? Did that go by too fast? Should I do that again? I said with a few notable exceptions. Everything here changes, including this. It's just that these tend to change a little bit more quickly than these. In other words, sometimes, wrong pipe. It can take a long time to change a belief. But you can change a behavior with a new behavior generator in 5 minutes. Right? I mean, you did it the first 3 days. You began to generate new behaviors. But beliefs, at least the awareness that most of us have because of how we've changed our beliefs, those seem to take more time. They seem to be more durable somehow. This is a good thing. I mean, what would happen if you woke up every morning and you had to figure out what it was you believed? It'd be a very difficult thing. So, there's one final level above this, and this is the level of spirit, right? And in the early development of this model of logical levels, it was just from here down, right? And then 2 or 3 years after it had been in, we've used it for a while, we noticed that there actually seemed to be an experience of and some change possibilities with the level of spirit. And this is when you have an experience of going beyond what you experience yourself to be, beyond your own ego. Right? That sense of connection, articulation with life, right? That we all have had that experience from time to time. Call it a peak experience, a religious experience. It could be as profound as looking in your newborn baby's eyes. And you as an individual just kind of dissolve into this state. So again, this is simply, in a sense, another way of looking at the structure of our lives, our subjective experience, how we move through the world. It's an amplification and an evolution of that, the three-part NLP pie. In fact, the three parts of the pie are like this. Here's the external behavior part, here's the internal computation part, and here's the internal state part, right? In logical levels, the further you go into identity, or the higher up the levels, the more of your neurology is engaged. The level of behaviors, you're using primarily motor functions, muscles and efferent nerves. You know, you're moving your hands and your legs. At the level of capabilities, you begin to kick in cerebral functions. The brain gets involved. At the level of beliefs, deep-seated processes are engaged. Sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, the heart, there's a deeper engagement of the nervous system itself. And at the level of identity, that's kind of the core where everything is firing off. So another way to think about this neurologically is that it's a kind of a representation of the hologram of neurological activation, right? As you get further into NLP, you'll discover that various techniques cluster in various levels of these logical levels. For example, the Change Personal History and New Behavior Generator, Circle of Excellence, right? These are designed to change the way you respond or react to something in the environment, right? To some trigger, some cue, or some emotional memory. And they're designed to give you a combination of internal states and behaviors. So they tend to cluster down here, right? They're about behaviors. Strategies, the things we've been exploring today and will explore this afternoon, tend to cluster up here at the level of capabilities. And later in the training, when you get into re-imprinting, that's going to be able to affect changing an individual or a system at this level. Any questions about this notion? Yeah, I'm sorry.
So capabilities include nervous system?
Say again?
Capabilities, they
Sure.
affect nervous system.
The way to think about it is that each higher level includes everything beneath it, right? In other words, capabilities of the mind include the behaviors that they then express, and of this thing of the heart, or deep neurological functions, has an influence on the mind and therefore the body, right? Yeah.
How spirit goes into that sequence?
Same thing.
What is the relationship between spirit and identity?
You have to ask the metaphysicians and the philosophers. Mm-hmm. I have my own ideas, but not until 5 o'clock. Ricardo.
NLP, of what I'm aware of so far, goes up to belief level, changing belief level,
and beyond.
Yes. And bringing it back to our example, the belief would be I can order at a restaurant, or I'm capable to at ordering at a restaurant, and under the capabilities would be the fact of being able to read and
make representations, do the strategy. Right. Literally, like hear the voice and what you just elicited. That's the capability.
And where would the criteria fit in this?
Well, it's interesting because the criteria, right?
The environment?
No, actually, the criteria it comes from up here.
Yeah.
It's in the background, but it comes from up here, right? What you value about a car, a wife, or a home, what's important about those.
Like health.
These are like subliminal beliefs, right? You have a belief, I've got to stay within my budget. That's my belief, right? So the criteria then becomes economics or cost that influence the capability. So these things up here really can influence this, right? Right.
So the change goes down and change goes up as well.
It can go up, but the way to think about it, or the way that we've experienced it in NLP, is that if you make a change at one of these higher levels, the lower levels must change. They will change to support the higher level change.
Must change.
Right.
But if you change some of your behaviors.
Possible, but not necessarily will it go all the way up. Right? It may, for example, you've got a bad habit. You bite your fingernails. And it's just a habit. No big deal. You change it, it stays right here. Right? But if the behavior is responding to your father with compassion when he's criticizing you, which is a capability. You understand this responding to criticism strategy is a capability. You're educating your brain how to do something. So it gives you the behaviors of responding to anybody that criticizes you. But if it happens to be unique and kind of special to your life's experience in which you learn how to respond more fully to your father, it may begin to actually affect these. The belief that he's a bad guy or I can't communicate might be affected by something you do down here. So sometimes changes here do reverberate into the higher levels. But as a pretty hardwired rule of thumb, if you make a change here, the rest of the system will readjust to support the higher level change. Right? Scott.
So if you're trying to change the beliefs, everything else changes.
Mm-hmm.
So what if let's say counselor was focused on the behaviors,
right.
The probability of success then is a lot lower.
Einstein once said, make it as simple as it needs to be and no simpler. Right? I mean, when you kind of grok this idea of the logical levels, part of the brain says, well, heck, whenever my clients come in, I'm just going to change these and that'll take care of it. Right? And in my experience, 7 times out of 10 or more, they don't need a belief change. They need a new behavior. Right? So a lot of the second half of the training is about learning, in a sense, what to do when. Which one is appropriate, which one isn't. But unless you have these basic skills of changing behaviors, working with capabilities, right, then the effectiveness of changing a belief is kind of a moot thing. Because when you change a belief in NLP, generally as a practitioner, what you do is you support that change with an enhancement of the lower changes. It's not just, boom, you change a belief, go away now, you're done. Right, exactly. You need to ecologically make sure they have congruent capabilities to support the new belief and behaviors that express the capabilities. Right? It's a holographic thing. Yeah, John.
Tom, I was 98% sure when you were writing the top level there, you were going to write ego.
Oh, I put that. This is the id, and then the ego.
I thought of that too. When I looked, because you said identity, and I looked up and said,
Ego, my ego. The ego is the membrane, as far as I'm concerned. Right? It's self-awareness, it's self.
Yes.
And beyond the ego, and again,
from where identity springs.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Spirit is, juxtaposition-wise, I guess.
Every esoteric spiritual teacher, every metaphysician, every philosopher I've ever read has said that. And in my experience, that's true. That the ego just doesn't thrive in the place of the spirit. It thrives elsewhere. It thrives in the place of the ego. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just the ego. It's different than. Oh, righty, I see by that partially glazed look in your eyes that it must be time for the afternoon break. So let's take, it looks like 14 minutes and 10 seconds. Okay, how we're going to kind of close the day is with an exploration of goals, outcomes. You remember your outcome work that you did with Jan Prince? What's an outcome? David? A goal. It's something you want. What are the fundamentals of a well-formed outcome?
Achievement.
Achievement, yeah. Steps to get there. A plan, right? A strategy to get there. Right? Evidence of knowing that you've achieved it. Right? So I want us to take the learning that we have so far from this pattern detection of strategies and apply it to the notion of outcomes. Because an outcome is nothing more than some kind of a goal that you have in mind. Right? And it's the same with a strategy. You initiate a strategy, as we determined here, with a certain goal. The goal could be ordering dinner or buying a house. or learning how to speak in public, or managing your business better. Those are all goals or outcomes. Right? And when you think about your life, there are some areas of your life in which you are achieving the goals that you have. You've either set them explicitly or there's been a desire, and you're happy with the way things are turning out. Right? There are other areas of your life, or maybe within the same area, where you're setting goals and you're not achieving the outcomes that you want. You're not getting what you want in terms of that goal. And it could sometimes be in the same context. It may be that with your employment, you've got the kind of job you want with the people you want, but in terms of achieving your financial objectives, it's not working. Right? So we're going to take the principles that we've learned from strategies and kind of synthesize that into a big, comprehensive pattern based on strategies, right, to enable you to more effectively achieve the goals that you want, particularly in areas where you've established a goal and you don't seem to be able to get the results that you want. So the first thing we do is we kind of just take this whole TOTE model and, the goal, the evidence, the operation, we kind of magically switch them around until it looks like goal, evidence, and operation. So in a sense, this is simply another way to write that about a strategy, right? This, in fact, is something called the GEO as opposed to the TOTE. Essentially, they're the same thing, just, kind of spelled differently, but the same principles. In this one, the TOTE, it's test, operate, test, exit. It's a computer model. This one is goal, evidence, and operations to achieve the evidence. And this is more like a human model, because this is what humans tend to do. They establish goals, and you know enough about outcomes now that it's important to have evidence. How will you know when you've achieved your goal? What will you see, hear, and feel that's different when you've achieved your goal? So in an effective goal, there is appropriate evidence, but there's also, as we're discovering with these little strategies, there's an operation that you go through to create the evidence, right? So there's certain things that you do in the world, in any goal, to create the evidence of having achieved the goal. The goal is the big chunk. It's kind of like the major outcome. What do you want? Well, I want to be an effective public speaker, say. It's a big goal. And then within that, you have, well, what's your evidence of doing it? Well, I'll be able to see 100 people. I'll feel comfortable in my body. I'll be able to, say to myself that I've been successful, and I'll hear compliments from the group afterwards. You have some specific evidence. And that's the target, the evidence. You're trying to create the evidence that's proof of the goal. And the way you do that is operations. And the operation phase is generally, in a GEO, the operation phase, just as you discovered over here, is generally the lengthiest. This is where you're doing more stuff. These two tend to be a little bit more cerebral. You imagine the goal, whatever it is you want, and you kind of put together the evidence, the sensory-based evidence for having achieved it. But then the operations, depending on what the goal is, could in fact be quite lengthy. If the goal is to have a PhD doctorate degree in neurophysiology or something, right? That could be a relatively lot of operations included in that. If the goal is to become more social in your 12-year-old son's PTA group, the operations may be considerably less. The evidence is likely to be different. So the evidence and operation is contingent on the goal. So that's the background in it. But let's think about goals themselves. Think about the goals that you have in life. Right? And these could be ones that you came here with, desires, things that you wanted to achieve. You could call them goals, outcomes, achievements, whatever. And think about the ones that you have now that seem achievable. In other words, you're pretty sure you're going to get them.
And then be the practitioner.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, see, this was a goal that at a certain point you weren't sure, right? And then the goal became more concrete, and now, particularly after the experience you've had here, the evidence for success is becoming more and more obvious. You're getting feedback. But the operation phase is sort of lengthy. You learn techniques, you learn basic skills, you learn principles. There's this whole series of learning that you go through to produce the evidence. And then when you got that, final day, you get a sweet little piece of paper, right? You get your practitioner certification, which is like a word. It's just a reference of an experience, right? But how about the goals that you established for yourself and you're not getting the results that you want? Right? These are the ones that tend to be the most confusing. Excuse me. Gesundheit. I thought I'd done that. That's what happens when you go to second position too quick. Somebody sneezes, you go, excuse me, right? So you guys wouldn't even have got that joke a week ago. That's wonderful. Telling NLP jokes. Would you please get out of second position? I'm talking to you.
I'm over there.
You're over there. Pardon me, but I'm dissociated. Talk to him.
More.
It's the end of the week, boy. I can feel it coming. Tomorrow's going to be a gas. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, where were we? Goals we weren't achieving. Like, for example, the goals of a trainer to engage the... But maybe that was my goal. Who knows? The goals that tend to be the most confusing and frustrating for us are goals that we've established. We think we know what they entail, and we have a lot of trouble getting them. Right? They just seem to, it's kind of, it's an effort to do them. We struggle with them, we kind of get there, we get a piece of it, it's not quite the thing, or we feel not great in the process of it, or it leaves us dissatisfied in some way. Or there's some criteria, something important about it that we thought was going to be there when we achieved it, but it turns out not to be. So there's something that is different about these two types of goals. A goal that you desire, you want, but somehow you're not getting the results that you want. But we're capable also of these other types of goals where we establish them, we've got good evidence for them, and the operations, maybe a little bit of learning, but we get them. And we're happy with them. We're pleased with the results, and we're getting the results that we want in relationship to that. So these are two different structures. In a sense, one way to think about it is that there are two different strategies. One is a strategy for success in getting what you want. The other is not. It's a strategy for getting what you don't want. Or it's a strategy for producing results that you don't want. So it's a bit of a conflict because the goal, the presupposition behind a goal is that it's something you want. But somewhere in there, there's some difficulties or you're not getting what you want. Is this, enough kind of language to bring up some reference experience for the kinds of things I'm talking about? Okay? So, who amongst you may have an area of life where they have a goal and they're not achieving the results that they want? Anybody want to play with that? Say again?
In the process of achieving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you establish a goal and somehow you're not getting the results that you want in that goal. All right? Let's see a show of hands at people that have issues like that. Okay, Harold, come on up. I wondered when your hand was going to go up. Now I got you. So you have a sense of where we're going to go in all this, right? We're going to actually, can I ask you to sit in this guy if it's comfortable enough, just for the purpose of the camera, and so we can maintain sort of similar.
Rotate.
Second. Rotate. This is the broken one. Functional.
The general contractor just performed analysis.
That's wonderful. What a great strategy. I'm glad you're in the group, right? Absolutely, Ricardo. Okay, so Harold, I'd like you to glance at this little schematic. Here's where we're going.
Right.
We're going to come up with an area of your life where you are getting results that you want, right?
So you're pointing it hard.
Over here. That's on this side of the board.
Right.
Exactly right. And another area where you're not. And I'd like these two to be similar contexts, because it's going to give you the most useful information. In other words, if the place that you're not getting results has to do with, say, working with people, and this one has to do with making plastic ship models of the Civil War, there's not going to be too much useful information in here to map across. So what you would do is find another area of being with people where you are getting results.
Okay.
So the categories would be things like my finances, relationships, dealing with large groups, intimate connections, fun with my kids, right? And within that, you want to find where the problem is, where you're not getting results, and some kind of a counterexample where it's going okay within that major context, right? So that's the sort of the when and where. And then we're going to explore the goal, the evidence, and the operations of both of these to find out what the effective one has that the other one doesn't. Okay? So give me some content.
Does this need to be a major life issue?
No, doesn't.
Easy,
Absolutely.
calm, safe.
This hour of the day, I would prefer that.
Okay.
So,
And you want me to give you the content?
yeah, this is one in which you do need a fair amount of content because you're going to be looking for things like what the evidence is and what things you do to achieve it and like that.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, let's see if this works.
All right.
The content is a round of golf.
Okay.
I play golf.
All right.
My goal is to break 80.
All right.
And I know what I have to do to achieve that goal. It's very specific. If I shoot, if I make the turn, first 9, and I'm 4 over par, I think, hey, I got a chance. That's the success side of getting what I want.
Right.
And then in the first 3 holes of the back 9, it goes out the window.
Okay. So first 3 of the...
I'll make a double bogey or a triple bogey or whatever and
Gotcha.
score a shot.
Okay.
There's no way I can make my desired goal.
All right, so let's backtrack a little bit on the information that we've got actually so far. The context of this, it's not getting results. The major context area is golf. Right? The goal, very specific, to break 80. Right? Evidence of moving towards this is that in the first 9 he's 4 over. Right? And then there's something that he volunteered here that's sort of evidence of not getting it, that's part of the operation. Somewhere in the first 3 past, it would be 10, 11, and 12. Right? On the back 9, it just falls apart. All right? So this is part of the operation. This is something that he's doing on the back 9. What do you want to have happen on the back 9?
I want to keep the momentum going.
Okay.
I want to keep playing like I was playing on the front 9.
Okay, so if you're able to keep the momentum on the back 9 as well as you had it going on the front 9, right, that would be evidence that you're really getting the results you want of breaking 80.
Right.
But there's something that happens primarily on the back 9, right, during we call it the operation phase here, that isn't working well. Okay, you say it falls apart. Okay, now let's look at this in small chunk ways too. This is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Kinesthetic. This is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Right? So far, we've kind of got some evidence that there's kinesthetics in both of these. Birgit, did you have a?
Yeah, it's just, I've never played golf, so I don't understand a word.
Great.
Yeah. Just get a little bit more information from the non-golf.
Sure.
Okay. So on the golf course that I typically play, par is 72.
What is par?
Par is the ideal, sort of the ideal score.
Okay.
Each course is rated by how many times how many strokes or hits it takes you to get into 18 holes, okay? And that should average out to 72.
Okay.
That's par.
That helps.
That's par.
Thank you, Birgit.
4 over par on my course would be a 39. Okay.
On 18.
30, yeah. 35, 4 over, 39.
You actually break it up. You actually break the score into 2 sections: the front 9 and the back 9. So they average.
Okay, par 72.
Let me step in first. Let me suggest that we do this. those of us who are somewhat familiar with the game of golf are going to continue with this as if we were. Those who are not particularly familiar with the game of golf, I want you to follow along with just the structure, because for you it's going to be kind of like a content-free process. My suspicion is that by the time the whole thing is complete, you may not have a clear understanding of the game of golf, but the pattern will actually probably pop out a little bit more clearly for you when we map it across. All right? Yeah.
You were talking about the front and back nine being kinesthetic, but most of his eye movements were visual.
Right. Mm-hmm. And those are the fine points that we have yet to kind of delve into. We're looking at it sort of in layers here. We've got just some big chunk information so far. So just like eliciting a strategy, there's a lot of going back and forth. You backtrack on the goal, you look for congruence here, then you sort for filling out the evidence and the operation. All right. Again, the goal, breaking 80, right? All right. If you successfully achieve that, what would that be like for you?
Oh, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, and if you imagine having done that, right? What's going on?
Well, I've never done it before, but I've come close.
Okay.
I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself. I feel accomplishment. I feel satisfaction. Great deal of satisfaction.
Feel accomplishment and satisfaction. All right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're aware of, if you imagine having achieved the goal of breaking 80, either auditorily or visually, when you kind of, you know, if you imagine, boy, there, I just did it, man, I had this great feeling of accomplishment, a wonderful feeling of satisfaction, right?
No, it's more a feeling.
Right. Okay? So we've got a lot of kinesthetics that are his evidence. When he has this feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction, there's a lot of fun and enjoyment in the process of doing it, and some specifics of doing as well on the back nine as you do on the front that'll lead to it, right? Part of the process. Okay? Great. So let's look at the operation. That's kind of your evidence. When you have those feelings, you'll know that, hey, this is it, I got it. Right? So the operations. What I think I'm going to do, and see if this makes sense to you as something useful. On the front nine, if you were able to play that well on the back nine, would that be what you want?
Yes.
All right? So we can actually, I think, take the same kind of behavior. Rather than looking for another context over here, he's already got a context where he's getting results. It's called the front nine. Right? If we could map over the same strategy, etc., of the front nine onto the back nine, right? How would that be for you? All right, great. Because he's already got the resonant success mechanisms on the front nine. So we're going to kind of relabel this. We're going to call this, we're going to call this the back nine. And this is the front nine. So let's explore the back nine first, right? And let me see. I'm going to use a different color code here. When you're teeing off on hole number 10, right? And you've had a really successful, decent front nine. There you are on number 10. Okay, what do you do? What's it like? What's going on in there?
I'm thinking about the front nine. I'm thinking about the holes I played.
Okay. Okay. So you're kind of reviewing the front nine, and when you say you're thinking about it, what do you? Well, so you're getting some nice visual eye scanning here, and right. So is it literally like?
It's remembering what I did and remembering my score.
Okay. So when you remember it, is it you see each hole, or how do you remember it? Or are you telling yourself that you really did well on number one, or do you have a feeling about each one, or when you remember the front nine, how?
I think I'm probably thinking about my mistakes.
On the front nine?
On the front nine.
Okay. So this is something that sort of pops out of the background, or you're thinking more about that than other things?
I'm remembering them more than anything else.
Okay. And how is it exactly that you remember them? Your mistakes.
I think, well, let's see, I see the shot, I see the ball going in the woods.
Okay.
The missing the putt.
Okay, gotcha. So it's this thing, it's a visual thing, you're remembering your mistakes. Is it primarily a visual thing where you see the ball going off into the woods? Is there any other component to it? Is there anything that you say to yourself? Is there any kinesthetic that you may have when you're reviewing the mistake?
It's mostly seeing. I guess there might be a little bit of internal talk.
About?
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Okay, a little bit of auditory internal, a little auditory digital there. That's kind of like a little short soundbite critique.
Right.
Right? The auditory critique of what you've just seen, which is a replay of the mistake.
Right.
Right. All right. And that's how you begin hole number 10. Right? And that's before you even tee up and get ready. Or is that when you're ready to go? When does this come up? Is it
before? Yeah.
Before? Is it when you're coming up with the golf cart, or is it when you're getting ready to tee up the ball? Or
I typically walk, so a lot of time
to review your mistakes.
Right.
All right. So this isn't just a one-shot thing. You're kind of going through a recursive loop here of seeing the specifics of what kind of fell apart on the first 9, and oh man, I shouldn't have done that, and da-da-da-da. Okay? So this is just like we did in the strategy over here. It's a recursive loop. This is going visual, remember, auditory, digital. And when you, is there, again, I want you to check out, I guess, kinesthetics is one system we haven't checked, is when you're reviewing those mistakes and you see like you really hooked a shot into the rough or whatever, yeah. Is there any comment, is there any feeling that goes along with that, or is it just pretty much a...
No, not too well.
Not a lot.
No.
Okay, great. Good.
Well, no, in fact, I don't feel much, which again, most of the golf instruction I've had indicates that you should be able to feel
right
where your club is doing.
Okay, but in terms of particularly the remembering of the past mistakes, there isn't a bunch of kinesthetic in that. Just since you have familiarity with this term, when you review mistakes, are you doing it from first position or third? Or is it like you're actually seeing the ball move away from you, or are you seeing yourself hit it and like that?
Yeah, I think I'm in third.
So you're observing it. Yeah. It's kind of like somebody was there with a video camera and filmed you. Right. So this whole thing is dissociated. Third position.
Right.
All right. That would account for the lack of kinesthetics. Right. Yeah. All right. So third position here. All right. Then you go up. You've reviewed those. You're at the tee. You set the ball. Then what happens? Because again, you're somewhere trying to hit at least 35.
Right.
Beginning right now.
Well, I don't think that I program myself to make a bad shot, but sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does.
Now, where this happens very dramatically is on the green.
Okay. The sort of the tension of the putt, or
when I've got a 10-foot putt,
right,
and even when it gets closer to the hole, a 3-foot putt.
Yeah.
Is a killer.
Let's start with a 10-foot. And what's the deal with that? You're there set.
10-foot putt is the objective is to get the ball close enough to the hole that you don't have to putt more than once.
Okay.
Additional putt.
One additional putt. So there you are. You're 10 feet away, and it's let's say the 10th or 11th hole. Right. So put yourself there. You're at the 10th or 11th hole. You got up there in the green, which is 10 feet away, and it's a challenging shot. So
the deadly thing, which is never up, never in. So I'll leave the putt short. You'll hit it far enough, hard enough, so the ball will get to the hole.
Okay. So you will leave it. This is literally a strategy that you set yourself up for, or how do you go about doing this thing?
I tend to do that.
Right. Right. It just does it all by itself. Right. So let's slow that one down.
Okay.
All right. Let's call it the 11th hole. You got a 10-foot putt. Right. You address the ball. Right. What do you do?
Don't leave it short.
That's what you're saying inside? I mean, you hear the quotes? That's what I was saying earlier. When the voice tone shifts, he marks it out with his hand. Don't leave it short. We know enough about negative commands from hypnosis. Don't spill the milk. Don't leave it short. So this is a really good strategy for leaving it short. All right, so the putt, and, again, behind every behavior there's a positive intent. He's trying to do the best he can. And yet, the way that it's kind of wired up, don't leave it short. All right, so you shoot it. Of course, it's short.
Short. I leave myself a 3-foot putt.
You got a 3-foot putt. Now you're going up to the 3-foot. Right? So you walk up there 3 foot and...
Don't miss this.
And all the clouds have parted, right? The revelation has come. Don't miss this putt. Okay, we know enough about language, and Charles, I'm sure, illustrated this to you, that if you utter a sentence in your native tongue or one that you're fluent in, you're making a representation of doing that. So every time he says, don't leave it short or don't miss this putt, somewhere internally that image is there. And interestingly, that's very much like his original review strategy of the first 9 holes. Right? This one may be slightly different because one, it's out of consciousness. The other one's a little bit more methodical. It's dissociated. But essentially, it's a similar kind of thing, kind of a rehearsal for what actually happens. Okay, so you sink it, maybe it takes 2, then the game progresses, let's say you're on the 13th or 14th, and how's it feel, where you're at, what's going on by now?
By the time I get to the 13th or 14th hole, it's just like I'm just going, because the score's already blown, so I'm just playing out the...
What happens to your game when the score is shot? You can't...
Sometimes it gets better.
Huh? Sometimes it's like nothing to gain, nothing to lose, you might as well, or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes it gets better.
Okay. Let's back it up to the point where you still got a shot at it, but it's got to be, there's no way if you screw 1 or 2 more shots it's going to happen.
I've never been that close.
Or get as close to that as you remember.
Okay.
But, maybe on the 11th or 12th where you still feel, boy, I still haven't blown it, I can still do it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
What's it like to be in that position? And there's still a chance. Any difference there?
There's it feels on the one hand it feels possible, and the other it's
all right. So this is a demonstration of incongruence. On the one hand, it feels this way. On the other hand, it feels that way. So that's a verbal reaffirmation of a kinesthetic gesturing of parts in conflict. Maybe yes, maybe no. So there's some incongruence when it kind of push comes to shove to the wall. All right. So that may come in there too. That notion of internal incongruence. Okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. I'm going to keep the momentum. This is the outcome of the whole thing. Now, when we elicited this evidence in the first place, this was about, breaking 80 over the whole course. And if you imagine doing that, then you would feel this great accomplishment, a good feeling of satisfaction, fun, enjoyment, like that. Yeah. When you begin the back 9, right? What is your, what is your evidence for doing as well on the back 9 as you did on the front 9?
The score.
The score, right? Looking at that and seeing a number.
Typically, the back 9 is a mirror of the front 9. So you've got the back 9, the front start off with par 4. You've got a par 4 on number 10, so on.
Gotcha. So basically, the evidence for being successful in the back 9 is to look at the scorecard and imagine it being basically a replication of the front 9.
If you made a birdie on the hole number 1,
right?
Wow, that's really great.
Right. Okay.
You start off that way on number 10.
Great.
Then you make a 6.
Great. So it's right. That would sort of blow your pictures, wouldn't it? So the evidence here, I'm going to move this evidence kind of. I'm going to pop it over here because this evidence is for the overall goal, not the goal in the back 9. Right? The goal on the back 9 is to match the scorecard to the front 9. Right? And that's you literally look at it, so it's a look outside. And then, is there any auditory component of it, or got to do this, or any of that, or is it just like you want to see it? That's what you want to see. And if you see it that way,
Yeah, see it.
okay. And if you were to see it that way, anything else? Is there any feeling there?
Well, it feels good if I come close to matching.
Okay. And that's further, but you don't know that until further down the road.
Until the end of the first hole, or number 10.
Right. And you can tell by then.
You can tell by then.
Right. So basically your game is determined at the 10th hole. Pretty much. Okay. C scorecard same as first 9.
Yeah, if you make it 3 on 1 and a 6 on 10.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So for you, the pivot of the whole thing is the 10th hole.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. And that's actually where we got most of our information, so that'll fit in nicely. The goal here on the back 9 is, in a sense, the goal is to have 35, right? More or less?
More or less.
All right? And the evidence of that is a visual external that you set up on the beginning of the 10th hole where you look at the scorecard and they're going to match. Right? Now it's interesting because here the evidence and the goal are very similar. A score of 35. The evidence on the back 9 is really impoverished. Right? He's got one little piece of evidence. And it's actually a visual construct. He goes visual external, looks at the scorecard, and then he sees, okay, back 9 looks the same as this. He constructs that and says, that's what my target is. And when I get that, I'll know it. Then he steps up to the 10th hole, right? And then he goes through this series of operations. On the way there, he's already rehearsed. He's already remembered all the mistakes that he's made on the front 9. He's replayed them in a dissociated way, see himself do it, and he's had a little bit of auditory dialogue about, wow, don't do that again, or that wasn't great. And then as he addresses the ball, particularly, he may get off a good strike off the tee there in the 10th, but as it approaches the green, it gets really serious. And that's when the internal dialogue starts, particularly in the putts 10 feet away. It's, don't leave it short. Don't leave it short. And, short. Then you got the 2 or 3 footer, and you go up, don't miss it. Don't miss this putt. Don't miss this putt. And boom, there goes the 10th hole. Right? Okay, good. I think we got plenty of information now about our not getting results. Yeah?
So if the 10th hole is very good, then does this whole sequence of operations start on the 11th hole? If 10th was like really great, you get going to 11th. Does that explanation?
And if it turns out, I'd hypothesize this. I don't know how many times you've had the experience, but if 10 and 11 both go pretty well, right? It's kind of like it starts rolling over again on the 12th.
Yeah, the shoe's going to drop down the
right.
line.
And you can hear that. That's kind of like a kinesthetic auditory. It's going to go clunk somewhere. Because what he's doing in there is he's still reviewing these past mistakes he's made, and he's still saying, God, don't miss this putt. Don't miss this putt. Don't make it short, right?
But he's moving it beyond.
Right. So this may be part of the operation that's sort of an artifact of this. If the 10th and 11th are actually pretty good, does the feeling of stress build up? Is this more than just the 10th? Or not? Feeling in your body, whatever, muscle tightness.
Yeah, pressure, that's a good word.
Okay.
A little bit.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you're building this up in response to this sort of mounting series of past mistakes that you've already made, and these putts that just barely made it in, and so the stakes are higher, maybe even the amplitude of the voice goes up or something, right? Or something like that, so that the tension increases. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's the same strategy. Each time it's recursive on a different hole, it amps up the kinesthetic that actually makes the whole thing worse.
So if he's going into the I don't know anything about golf, but if you're getting to the 14th or 15th hole and you're doing really good, does that change how getting closer to
the closest I've ever been breaking 80. I shot an 81 one day, and I made a double bogey on the last hole.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
It's worse as you go, because
Right.
you're like, oh, I'm almost there, but if I screw up, oh my God, I'll blow it, and I'm close
So,
to
I would imagine right before that double bogey on that hole, before you teed off, you're going, God, I wonder how I could blow this thing. Oh, double bogey. Boom. Right? As that tension builds up. So it's an exquisite strategy for generating these states and not being successful, right? There's nothing, I mean, it works exactly the way it works. It's very effective. Now let's contrast it, right, with an area of this same game, I mean, literally the same, 18 holes where you are getting results. I want you to pick the ideal front nine. Time and place where, boy, the front nine were, man, best you've done, right?
Okay.
I want you to just sort of be there and kind of really get into that whole feel. You're on the course, and you're going back in time to that kind of ideal front nine where you really got the results that you wanted. Right? That day when you showed up, okay? When you showed up that day, what was it like? What was your goal? What did you want to do? Same as every other day? Was it any different?
I don't think I was thinking about it that much.
Okay, good.
Just kind of showed up.
Showed up, ready to play.
Right.
Right? And during that day when you set up to play, did you have a target or a goal for the front nine, or was it for the whole game, or?
It's always for the 18 holes.
Right.
But that front nine, things just work.
Okay, great.
They just work.
Gotcha. All right, so there's obviously some different kinesthetics here that we haven't picked apart to understand why they're there. But the goal, essentially, is the same one we had over here. He shows up, he wants to break 80. Right? Now, let's look at, you want to break 80, you're coming up to the first tee, right? You got a blank scorecard, right? And do you ever consider the front nine as a sort of a chunk in and of itself? Like, here I go in the front nine, and now I'm going to do the front nine.
The front nine is like this wonderful, open, it's all possibility. It's a wonderful feeling. Because anything's possible on the first hole.
What's the difference? First hole and the fourth.
Score.
Okay, anything's possible before the club strikes the ball.
Yeah.
And you go up there with that state, and there's this big, expansive green, and there you are, and you're very much, it seems to me, it's like the way you're describing it. You're in your body, looking out of your eyes, and...
Grass is green. And
all right.
As a person who doesn't...
Hang on, let me do some elicitation first. All right? So this is somewhat different than the way he approaches the back nine already. It's associated, it's expansive, there's a real unique kinesthetic involved. Okay. And do you ever refer to the scorecard at the...
No, usually it's a ritual. Take a card, stick it in your back pocket.
All right.
Take off.
Okay, great. So let's take off, right? Okay. And play the first hole. What's going on there? The operation of actually doing it,
I hit the green in regulation.
Okay.
Nice drive. Second shot on the green. It's a par 4 opening hole. So hitting the green in regulation is being on the green in 2.
Huh?
So 2 putts, par.
Got it.
Every now and then, you do it with 3.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and you notice here's the kinesthetic again. All right, so the end of the first hole, wow. And this is that ideal day,
No, perfect.
Right. So it's like you see the flag, tee off, you're on the green in 2, right? Are you aware of any auditory, any things that you may be saying to yourself, or feelings in your body, or anything like that?
I guess, yeah. I think I am aware, especially because I usually play with a group, that there's a lot of oohs and ahs that I do that.
Okay. Oohs and ahs. All right. And is there any feeling associated with that, or are you just aware of them? Do you just make you feel good? Or?
Oh, it makes me feel good, yeah. Sure.
All right. So you have a great first hole. You go up to the second hole. And again, this is that ideal 9. What's the second hole like?
Well, depending upon the drive.
Right.
The second hole is a long par 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a good drive and you get a good second shot, then you're in position. If you put yourself in position,
right,
you can hit the green in 3.
Okay. Let's say you get on the green, and what might be if you get on in 3, or how far are you from the pin?
I'm usually within 20 or so feet.
Okay, so you got 20-footer. And so imagine addressing that 20-footer, and you're on appropriately. You're in great shape. It's been wonderful. You heard some oohs and ahs just a minute ago. As you approach that 20-footer, what goes on?
I tell myself 2 putts and you've got another par.
You tell yourself what?
2 putts and you've got another par.
Right. God. All right, so you take your first putt. Right? Brings it right up close there, right? Then you're going up to your second one, so what might be an appropriate distance for your last putt?
That early in the game, it's not, I go anywhere from 5 feet in.
Okay, so let's call it a 4.5, 5-footer, and you approach that, right?
Yeah.
What goes on?
I usually don't tell myself don't miss the putt.
Right.
Usually, get this putt, you've got another par.
Okay. Right. Hit this one? Par. All right. Great. Second hole happens. Let's go up to the third hole, the fourth hole. Let's say the fourth. Again, it's perfect 9.
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
That's usually pretty good.
Right.
The hole on the course I play is easy.
Right. And what is it about it that's easy?
It's short.
It's short.
It's a little par 3.
Okay.
Maybe 120 yards.
Right. So you make par on that one pretty regularly.
Pretty regularly.
Right. So let's say you hit the first 2 and you got that one. What's your last shot to the pin on that par 3?
On the par 3?
Yeah.
I can typically hit the green.
Okay. So you're looking at 10, 12 feet or something like that? Or?
Well, it depends. The green on this hole, that's what makes this hole difficult, because there's a real steep shelf
Right.
on the green.
Right.
So if the pin's up on the top and you land down here, it's a tricky putt.
Gotcha. So imagine being in the position for that tricky putt.
Okay?
You look up there, everything's going great so far.
Yeah,
Right.
you just hit it.
Just hit it. Anything come before you just hit it?
Well, you line it up.
Right.
You do what you usually do, but you just hit it.
Okay. Okay, I think we have enough information actually to go for it now. Obviously, just like the strategies you were doing, you can get exhaustive in this. But what you're looking for are real key significant differences. And where it's at, it's primarily this internal auditory in the operation that needs to be modified. So what we're going to do is, I want you to imagine sort of playing out that really beautiful front 9 that you were just, right? And this time we're going to experience the back 9 in a different way, right? First thing is that as you leave, the 9th hole and you're walking over to the 10th, right? What I want you to do is, whoever you're walking with, right? Some conversation with them, let your vision expand to see outside you everything that's happening, right? So your awareness is really external. You may have some conversation with the person you're with, and you could comment on the way that they performed in the front 9, and you could listen to some of their comments about the great shots that you had on the front 9. You just kind of let those go in, and that feels good to do that, right? And that's the walk up to the 10th, and on the 10th, what you do with the scorecard, it stays in the back pocket. You tuck it down a little bit deeper, right? It just stays there. And when you feel it there in the back pocket, again, you open up your eyes, and you know that wonderful feeling you had on the first hole? If you go back to that for a minute, just feel that on the first hole, on that perfect day, when everything is wide open and wonderful, your body knows exactly how to feel that. I want you to hold on to that feeling, and it's the 9th hole. Excuse me, it's the 10th. With this, let these come together. Take this feeling on to the 10th. right? Let it be there. Let it go a little bit deeper. It's kind of like you call on the you that was there at the first T, right? That wonderful, wide open feeling, the feeling that anything's possible. Because anything is possible. It's obvious that it's possible. You did so well in the front 9. On the back 9, anything's possible. Who knows, right? And then when you're ready, it's that wide open, external, expansive, right, gaze. Right? And you look out, you spot the pin externally, you see it, and boom, tee it off. You know exactly up in the green in 2 or 3, whatever it is. Right? And as you approach the putt, you can hear comments, some oohs and ahs from the crowd about that. It was amazing off the 10th, right? For Harold. And you're going up to the putt, and it's a decent putt. You may have to putt out in 2. It's a long one. But you go up to it, you look at the pin, right? And this feeling is still there. Man, you're still right on track. Anything is possible with it. You just line it up, and you just hit it. Boom. You know you're going to go down in 2. Right? Have that feeling, you walk up, it's like a 4-footer. That's no big deal. Keep your eyes open, right? Line up. You're in your body, and boom. And you hear it ka-plunk. And then this feeling gets even stronger because you're walking over to 11. Right? And what you're hearing is kind of the murmuring of people around him. My God, it's the best round he's had so far in the back 9. He's approaching the 10th. And the 10th is actually easier. The 11th is easier than the 10th. There's something about this feeling that is becoming familiar in your body. Right? Your eyes are wide open. You're listening to what's happening around you, what people are commenting. Basically, you got your gaze fixed on that pin. And boom, it's just natural. Your body knows exactly what to do, and off it goes. Right? You've tracked on what the par is, you know what that is, and you're down right where you want to be. The putt comes up, there it is. You line it up, and it just, you're down in 2. You got it. And the same feeling persists on the 13th and the 14th. Right? And you just play through them. All the way through. And it's not so much that the scorecard is just in your back pocket and it doesn't matter. But what matters, right, is this feeling that anything's possible. And you're about to prove it. Because it's the last hole, right? And you're a couple strokes under par. And you were right. Anything's possible. Right? So you line it up on that one. And what you do is you open your eyes wide and line it up on the pin, and that baby just flies, right? And you know, man, this baby's going to go down 2 under par, right? And bing, you line it up, and bing, there it goes.
That's cool.
You know? Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know how to do it. You did it on the front 9.
Man, Harold, what a shot.
Cool. All right, so we're backtracking here, and when we mapped these across, what we put in was what we took out of the old strategy was just as important as what we put in. Just sort of tracking on this, it's obvious that the thing that was really a setup for failure was this visual and auditory review of failure. Right? That just began to amplify the unpleasant kinesthetics as the game went on, and the specific things that he was saying, right? Those had got to go because they are nowhere in the one where he is getting results in the front 9. They're not there. So we're kind of mapping the strategy, the whole strategy of the back 9 over on this, and we're looking for the ones that seem really significant. And the ones that seem really significant and different is this evidence of this open, wonderful, anything's possible feeling, the solid state change. That's a great resource. And he's got that at the beginning of the front 9, right? So if we can cause that to persist through the back 9, that state is going to make it so that he doesn't have to go to this internal auditory. So I used a kinesthetic anchor, right? Anchoring a state. I had him go back to it. I anchored the state. And then when I had him go up to the 10th with that state, you notice that it was like a little bit wonky for a while. He was doing some integrating. It didn't look quite as robust as it was. So I used some more words to boost up that state, right? And then when he really got into the feeling, we used his sort of strategy, and basically it's like visual external. See it out there, line it up, and hit it. There's no superfluous auditory in there. And when that's not there, it makes feeling this state available. Because feeling the state of anything's possible is very difficult when you've got internal dialogue running that don't miss it, or don't leave it short. As soon as this comes in, or even this, if you're reviewing your mistakes visually, even if it's dissociated, that's what it does to this feeling of anything's possible. You know it's not possible because you're reviewing videos, and which proves that it's not. So what we eliminated, in a sense, as being superfluous to excellent performance was this review of mistakes and this internal auditory. And we basically took from our getting results, right, this evidence, and we let the evidence permeate the operation, this positive state. And the operation itself was really quite simple. And I'm betting you that when you're in really prime form on the course, your operation really is simple. It's there, a sense of knowing, and hit it.
Yeah,
it's not a complicated thing.
You don't even feel when you're hitting the ball.
Right, exactly. It's very complicated when you're not doing well. There's all kinds of stuff going on, right?
It hurts.
Exactly. Cool. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay.
Why are my feet asleep?
I don't know. Dangling?
You should let us know
Cool.
next time you play.
Pardon?
Tell us the score.
You want to borrow my phone?
What's that?
You want to make a tea time?
Back to tomorrow. Okay, we're going to review this, and today before closing we're going to get through, I think I'm going to do this I would like to do this in groups of 3. This is really worth doing with a consultant. So you'll have someone that's the elicitator, that in my position, jotting this stuff down. You'll have a consultant, the third person, and you'll have someone that's exploring, who was in Harold's position. This little item is written up in your handouts if you want to follow along on page number 7, right? And again, it's a modification of this thing we've been calling the TOTE. We give it a different acronym, and it's GEO, Goals, Evidence, and Operation. Right? And on the following page, on page 8, you've got a chart, kind of like the one I put up on the flip chart. A little graph there of the 2 different categories. You can use that one to take notes on with your partners. The first is to think of a situation where you're not getting the results you want. And you elicit this information, the goal, the evidence, and the operations. And this one, right, was golf. We found a counterexample within the same game, right? And that's number 2. You want to think of a similar context where you are getting the results that you want. And in the one where you are getting results, you write down the goal you have in mind, the evidence, and the operations, what you're doing to achieve it. There's a little asterisk there. If you go down to the bottom, it says that similar context should be as much as possible like the desired outcome, right, where you're not getting the results. Since finding an identical context to compare is unlikely, and in this case we really got lucky because we had an exactly, right, similar context. It was the same context. But often it's not, right? I mean, it's not exactly the same. So what you want to do is sort of think about it as similar context, like activities, doing something, knowing something, getting something, relating people, that kind of thing, or interacting with certain kinds of places, right? So you want the context as close as possible when you find this counterexample. Then in number 3, what you begin to do is you compare and contrast the goal, evidence, and operations of the 2 situations for significant differences. All right, and here's some examples of this. Typical aren't getting results include an inappropriate goal, right? And actually, this one, the goal was okay in the second. The first one, it was the evidence and the operation down here. The evidence for this one was this visual constructed image of a scorecard saying something. That was his only evidence on the second one. He had a direct kinesthetic experience for evidence on the front one, right? And restricted or inappropriate operations, which certainly fits this. right? The operations are inappropriate because of what kinds of states they gender, right? So significant differences may be in one, more, or all of these areas. In this case, the goal was pretty much the same. The evidence is somewhat different, but the operation was significantly different. So when we changed it, the thing that changed the most was the operational form, right? And we used a resource from the evidence chunk and allowed that to permeate the operation. Okay? So what you do here in step 4 is you add the resources. In this case, we added 2 specific resources. One, actually 3, this thing of going external with the eyes, this internal feeling of it's wonderful, anything's possible, then this external auditory input, people saying ooh and ah and him talking to them, and then the strategy of going external, seeing the pin, right, and just shooting the ball. No dialogue, no nothing. So those are what we mapped across to this one, and in the process we deleted a whole bunch of stuff that didn't need to be there. So you add the resources from the are getting into the aren't by imagining fully experiencing the aren't getting results situation, whatever it is, the back 9, with the qualities of the are getting results context. So this was, and you want to imagine this fully. It's not an abstract thing. That's why you want to really build up whatever's there. Kind of like walking them through it slowly. It's as if they were there again. If you can find some kinesthetic anchors or states that they want to be in, that's a really good way to locate them in it. Or you can rehearse them through making visual imagery or hearing specific dialogue if that's there. But when you're mapping across, you really want it to be a solid, positive, almost virtual reality experience. That's why I began this. We're going to go ahead and play the back 9, but we're going to play it in an entirely different way. And this was, if you noticed, it was kind of like a hypnotic induction. Right? My voice tone dropped. I was pacing his breathing. I had a good kinesthetic anchor going. You could get even more artful. I wonder if you realize exactly how good it will feel on the 14th hole when you surprise not only everyone in the crowd, but that part of yourself that hits a hole-in-one on the 15th. Whatever, right? So, now, as it says here, in this case we didn't need to because it was all specifically within the context of golf. Sometimes when you're mapping across, if it's not an exact match, you may have to kind of adjust these things to fully fit the new situation. So, for example, if it's the guy wants to get along better with his kids, because he's not, but he gets along really well with everybody in his office, right? And so you're going to use some of the skills of relating at the office to the kids. You may have to modify it a little bit to make it appropriate for dealing with the children, right? Does that make sense how that could occur? Okay, so that's basically the strategy. Any questions about the structure of it as compared to the demonstration or as you imagine running a partner through this? All right, I want this to be, this is a pretty big chunk piece, and you're likely to, depending on the issue that you come up with, this operational phase particularly, might be pretty rich. I want to give you plenty of time, so I'd like you to have as an intention 25 minutes. All right, each person's going to have 25 minutes. We're going to only get through one round today, and then we'll have a real brief discussion tonight, and then first thing tomorrow morning we'll finish off the final 2 rounds. Okay? Find 2 partners and run them through the geo. Wow. I just saw Monet do that in an altered state. That was great. Cool. All right, we are going to pick up exactly where we left off first thing tomorrow morning after we see if there's any questions or observations about the first steps here. I thought I'd close tonight with a story about one of these guys. Remember these guys? Some of them are still in the box over there. All right, and remember our task, hopefully by the end of tomorrow, particularly those who are going to be taking the long sail home. Just a little preamble. Let's the folks that tomorrow, whose last day is tomorrow. Oh wow, breaking my heart. Come on, wow. You'll notice that I have my hand up too. Right? It'll be my last day. Bob and I will be leaving Sunday evening after the thing there. So changes. Absolutely, As I was saying when we first began using our Hawaiian navigator voyage metaphor, that there were some that were just going to go to the island next door, and they've already come and gone. They've learned that journey. And there are those of you that were going to sail all the way from Maui to Ni'ihau, which is the Forbidden Island just off the coast of Kauai. And your journey is coming to an end tomorrow. And then there are the other intrepid travelers that have signed on for the full voyage to Tahiti. So there's voyages within voyages within voyages. And along the voyage, you know, as with all great journeys, what happens is stories are told. And whether you think about it this way or not, what you've been doing with your peers and colleagues in this room since day one is telling them your story. Right? And sometimes it's been some content about your history and who you are and what's important to you. And sometimes your story has had to do with pictures, sounds, and feelings, and strategies, and internal states. But it's been this ongoing sharing of stories. And stories are important, I think, that regardless of how long your journey here, when this journey for you is complete, in the years to come, it will become a story. And you'll tell others of the experience that you had. And hopefully, like all good stories, you'll add to it, you'll embellish it, you know, so it'll just kind of grow and expand and become really part of who you are. But kind of in thinking about these guys, there's a lot of stories about these people, stone people. And one of my favorites involves one of these, but a number of other characters too. The first two characters that it involves actually came to be before time and space. No one knows if they even came to be or always were. I'm talking about Mother Goddess and Father God in a time before time, in a space before space. And for before time itself, so you couldn't say for a long time or a short time or, you know, they had been together. Until something changed, as does everything, it seems. And they determined to come even closer together to manifest reality. And they did. They manifested reality. They manifested time and space. And time and space was big and vast and infinite. And it was kind of empty. So they started putting things in it, you know. And we put in stars and nebula and black holes and just amazing celestial phenomena. And something urged them to make something a little more precious and dear, kind of like this little stone. And so they created something that for them was kind of like a little stone is for us, you know. They created the planet Earth. This beautiful blue-white gem spinning in infinite space around a relatively insignificant star, about a third of the way out a galactic arm of one little galaxy amongst billions that they had created. They created this marvelous planet. And in the process of this creation, they kind of got carried away. They started creating animals and birds and plants and little protozoa, and they just went into a whole frenzy of creation. They created a couple of us, a couple of people. They had two children, as we know children to be in our families, two-legged children, human children. And these children's names were Kane and Kanaloa. Right? That sounds kind of Hawaiian, doesn't it? Kane and Kanaloa, which is as it should be, because this is a Hawaiian story. Right? And this is a story I learned from a Hawaiian kahuna named Ed Kaive, who lives on Kauai. And the way that he tells it is soon after the creation of Kane and Kanaloa, you know, the children had children kind of thing. And by then, time existed, so time could pass, and a lot of time passed. And Mother Goddess recalled something of immense importance that she had to do on the other side of infinity. So she put this blue-white planet and the children and all the creation in charge of Father God. He was going to be the caretaker while she went about her business beyond eternity, and she receded beyond the veil of time and space, leaving Father God in charge of everything. And, well, things went fine for a while. Things kind of went on as they had been. The children multiplied, and the creation continued to create. And no one knows quite why it changed, but something a little wonky began to happen to Father God. You know, some say that he got bored. You know, some say that he missed Mother Goddess. But one way or the other, he started doing things like taking the planet, and he'd look at it, and then he'd shake it, you know, like one of those things with the snowflakes that you shake around Christmas time. Earthquakes, mountains would fall, and the people would run and hide, and it got really weird. And they started making up reasons why Father God was shaking the planet, you know, and all this stuff came to be. Then he realized he could have fun with the weather. He'd reach inside a cloud, create a lightning bolt, and go boom, you know, and people would scatter, and forest fires would start. So, you know, we all know what it's like to be bored. We make up things to do, right? But it was affecting the children in a terrifying way, because lightning bolts were striking, the animals were acting weird, you know, and the mountains were falling, volcanoes, earthquakes, floods. It was a scary time for the kids, because Father was, you know, up to some kind of strange antics. Until, in the mysterious way that women seem to have, Mother Goddess somehow got wind of this, and she came zooming back from the other side of eternity, saw what Father God had done to the beautiful blue-white planet and the children, and was so enraged that she took Father God and zoom, encased him in a stone. And she took the stone and she threw it into the sky above the earth, where it circled endlessly, with Father God trapped in the sky in a stone. Now, the children in those days are very sensitive, and they knew what had happened. You know, they could see this stone as it circled up there. And as with all children, regardless of how, you know, uppity and how acting out the parents get sometimes, at heart loved their mother and their father both. So the children determined to free Father God from his prison of stone. All right? Now, the sons and daughters of Kane were a very thoughtful group of people. So they started thinking about the problem. They were using their mind. They realized they were here, he was there, big distance in between, some kind of bridge had to be built. So they got together their best thinkers, and the best idea they could come up with to begin with was to take, you know, big boulders, big giant stones, get a lot of people together and start piling these stones one on top of another to build a tower, higher and higher into the sky, with the anticipation that they could build a tower tall enough that they could then kind of stand on the tower and begin to catch the stone and slow its passage. So they did. They built immense towers. And this wasn't just one place, although in certain parts of the world it was more dominant than others. But it was all over the world. The sons and daughters of Kane were building these towers. But a strange thing happened to these early towers. The weight of the stones on top was so heavy that it began to crush the foundation stones to sand. And the foundation wouldn't hold the weight. So they could only go up so high. So they went back to the drawing board. And they took what they'd learned and they kind of acted on their feedback. And they went, well, this doesn't work. There's something wrong with the bearing capacity of the foundation stones. And they drew plans and schematics. And they began to experiment with different possibilities, building materials, and different